Right, so we talked about what we want to look for in a cow, and we've got a multi-sire breeding situation out here. So we've got a group of bulls that are chasing a cow in heat, and that's good. They're doing their job. And again, remember, this is a hot day in Missouri in the middle of the day, and these bulls are out here. They're not in the shade or hanging out in the pond. They're actively servicing cows. Now, we talked about in a cow, we want her to be very feminine in appearance. But in a bull, it's the exact opposite. We want a bull to be very masculine in appearance. And if we look at these bulls here, you can see what I'm talking about. First of all, when we look about the head, neck, and shoulders, we want a head that clearly looks like a bull. Even if you see him from the front, there is no doubt just from the head itself, you know he's a bull. There's no mistaking him for a steer or a cow. And that means that they're gonna have a broad forehead, they're gonna have a wide muzzle, they're gonna have very coarse and many times curly hair on that forehead. And then when you get back into the neck, they're gonna have, very masculine bulls are gonna have a very pronounced crest to the neck. So we wanna see that pronounced crest, and then we want that to transition into very thick muscled shoulders in these bulls. And I want to see the pronouncement of muscle in those shoulders. If we look at this dark red bull down here, you can see the crestiness to the neck, you can see the musculature in the shoulders, and then as we come back behind the shoulders, just like in the cow, we want to see a lot of body capacity. So I want to see a bull that's very deep bodied, that has a lot of expression to that midrib. When viewed from the front or rear, it's going to be a very expressive barrel. And as we look across down the side, many times, particularly when the sunlight is just right, we can see lines, horizontal lines running across the ribs. That's an expression of endocrine functioning. And a lot of people describe those, they call them happy lines. Call them happy lines because they are functioning optimally from an endocrine or hormonal standpoint. And so we like to see that visible in our cattle as well. But as we look at these bulls, you know, again, they've got to do a lot of work every day, you know, during the breeding season. So it's critical that they're very sound in the feet and legs. They're able to stride out and move and mount cows and breed cows and dismount and still maintain their soundness throughout an entire breeding season. So we're looking for bulls in terms of right around the feet and legs. First of all, they're free of any kind of structural abnormality in the entire skeleton and especially in the legs. Secondly, when we look at their feet, we want them to have big, sound hooves. We look for bulls that don't have any hoof problems. If they have long toes, curling toes, things like that, that is not a desirable breeding bull, and those traits are actually heritable. So we want to not use bulls that have feet and leg issues. Number one, it'll impair their ability over the length of a breeding season, and as they get older and heavier, to breed well, but also they're going to pass that down to their progeny, and they're going to sire females, daughters in our herd, that are going to have those same feet and leg problems. The other thing we try to avoid in our bulls are bulls that form corns between their toes. And this can happen both in the front feet and the back feet. So we want to make sure that our bulls are free of corns and that we do not have that issue, because those corns are fleshy lobes that form between the splits of the two hooves on each foot. And as though that bull matures, those fleshy lobes will grow, and that flesh can split and open up, and that allows opportunity for bacteria to be able to enter up into that flesh and infect the foot area around it and even get into the bone and create bone infection. So we can have significant soundness issues going forward on bulls like that. Now, what I want to see in these bulls, so we've talked about the head, neck, and shoulders being very masculine, very thick in appearance, the neck very cresty. As I come back to the hindquarters of that bull, I want to see that bull have a lot of width from hook to hook and pin to pin in those hindquarters. And if he's got a lot of width from pin to pin back there at the tail head, that tells me he's going to sire daughters that are going to have width from pin to pin, and they're going to have less calving difficulty when they calve. And just like in a cow, I want to see some slope, downward slope from the hooks to the pins, because that's the natural path that the calf is going to be born coming through the pelvic canal. I want bulls, if they're going to sire daughters with a nice slope from hooks to pins, my bulls have to have slope from the hooks to pins as well in that pelvic region. And then I want to see a nice deep hindquarter on these bulls. What I do not want is I don't want bulls that are double muscled in appearance and that are too thickly muscled, because those bulls can get restricted in movement, and over time and as they age, they can break down and it significantly impairs their service life. Rather, I want to see bulls that have adequate muscling, but a long, deep, smooth muscle pattern from front to rear. Those are the type of cattle that are going to give us high-performing animals that are going to be very, very efficient on forages. The other thing that we have found is that very masculine bulls tend to sire very feminine daughters. And that's certainly a trait that we want in our cows. Now, one of the last points that I want to talk about with a bull, but certainly very, very important, is the testicular development on these bulls. So what we're looking for there is we're looking for bulls that have adequate scrotal circumference, but also have adequate testicular length. Because what we have to remember is each testicle is a factory that produces the sperm cells that are going to fertilize those eggs. So in any factory, it's total square footage, total volume of the factory that determines output of that factory. Oftentimes we get hung up just on scrotal circumference and think that's the total determiner of the size of that factory for sperm cell production. But it's much more than that. We've got to have the total square footage, so to speak, and that's total volume. So we measure total volume by both circumference and length. Now, we want both testicles to be even, both in circumference and length. If we have inequality in testicles, those are going to be bulls that I'm going to not keep intact as a bull and not use in my breeding herd. Secondly, I don't want any testicular disorientation. So those testicles should be properly oriented, which means that they're going to be hanging straight down in an orientation directly perpendicular to the line of the body. If those testicles have any twist to them from front to rear, and those testicles are twisted more towards the front, more towards the rear, then those bulls are going to have problems at times during the year with proper thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is the ability of the bulls to be able to raise or lower the testicles as it gets colder or warmer, because for proper sperm cell or spermatogenesis production to occur, then the temperature around those testicles has to be kept within a certain range. And if the bulls can't properly thermoregulate by raising and lowering the testicles, that's going to impair fertility at certain times of the year. So we certainly don't want to do that. So testicular length, circumference, and orientation is important. Also, at the bottom of each testicle, there should be a little almond-shaped projection that we should see from each one. And that little projection is part of the epididymis. The epididymis is a tube that transports, stores, and matures sperm cells. So in that bottom, right at the very bottom of each testicle, where we see that little almond-shaped projection, that's where sperm cells are accumulated in the epididymis and stored for maturation. Without that maturation process, those sperm cells are not capable of fertilizing an egg. So that's a sign of a highly fertile bull and a bull that's functioning properly, especially in the breeding season. We want to be watching for those little almond-shaped projections on the bottom of each testicle to make certain that that bull is still fertile throughout the entire breeding season and doing what he is supposed to do. The other thing that I'm going to look for during the duration of the breeding season, oftentimes, and particularly in a multi-sire group like this, you know, you can see these bulls as one mounts a cow, another comes by and hits him in the side and jostles him. So when that happens, sometimes we can get some trauma to the testicles of the bull that was mounting that cow. And so we want to watch during the breeding season for swelling, abnormal swelling, edema, things like that in one or more testicles of these bulls to know that maybe that's a bull we've got to pull and replace him during that breeding season because he's had a little bit of trauma and his ability to perform is going to be reduced. And again, this is a very masculine bull. He's highly fertile, and you can see he's striding out very easily and confidently. I actually want to see that level of confidence. You can tell just by the way he's carrying himself. He knows he's a bull, and he knows exactly what his job is. And that's what I want in a bull. I want to see those bulls very active. You see how he's walking around, working his way through the herd and checking these cows to make sure he's covered everybody that's in heat today. So obviously the bull, what he was just exhibiting there with the upper lip curled up is called the flamen response. And that's in response to the hormones that this cow is producing, telling him that she's close to coming into heat and being ready to be bred. So bulls will often exhibit that as they go around and sniff these cows in a herd. And that's one of the things you want to see bulls that do exhibit that flamen response. That tells you that they've got good libido and should be very good breeders.